And hi, welcome back to High on History. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Liz.
And so last week I had mentioned we were going to talk about the Odyssey. Well, I went on an Odyssey personally. I broke 2 pairs of glasses. And in that adventure, breaking both my pairs of glasses, I was unable to really do any of my research. Comparing real life events to Homer's Odyssey is absolutely doable, but without having a good pair of glasses to be able to do my research, I wasn't really able to come up with anything. And as much as I love YouTube, it was not much of a help. Finding some things about Ithaca. There were some really cool channels that came up under the name Odyssey and stuff like that, and just like with research that was really cool, but not actually anything that I could find verifiable. So earlier that week too, though, before as I announced that I was going to do the Odyssey, I had a dream about Volcano Day. I was in Pompeii. So,
right, in your dream.
Yeah, in my dream, I was in Pompeii for Volcano
so cool.
Day. Yeah.
Weirdly, I once dreamt that I had to rescue Cosette during the French Revolution. It was a great dream. I was flying around and I was rescuing people out of these tenement houses while Paris burned around me. It was very cool.
Cosette, was that a...
Cosette is a completely fictional character in Les Miserables, but like in my dream, I'm like rescuing all these people, but I'm frantically flying around the city looking for Cosette. It was a very cool dream.
Can you hand me my drink, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hey, check this out. So, we have lots of little side stuff that we like to do because we work in a dying industry that will be taken over by AI someday, and we eventually need alternative income. So, Jordan crochets, and she crocheted us these lovely can cozies for,
obvious reasons.
Us.
And so...
Okay, so anyway, keep going.
Okay, so I was struggling with the Odyssey, having my own adventure, not being able to read, not being able to see. I struggled with headaches all week because of it. So we finally decided, why not actually talk about Volcano Day?
Yeah.
We all love Pompeii. We're all familiar with Pompeii, too.
Well, a little bit. I think one of the things, we all know the story. Pompeii blew up, a bunch of people died, a bunch of people were buried
600,000.
Yeah. And buried in position. I think we've all seen the National Geographic pictures of that. But you uncovered a lot of stuff.
I did.
That I did not know about.
So, touching on those pictures real quick about the famous body casts, that was actually done by a gentleman named Giuseppe, mind you...
Fiorelli?
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you can remember that for me.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
He is who we kind of can thank for improving archaeology. He made some of the plastic casts, and he really actually did a lot of work on preserving the site. He started the top-down instead of tunneling-in method for a very long time through the 1800s, 1700s. Archaeology was like a tunnel through and just loot.
Ugh.
Yeah. He started what we know as digging through each individual layer, centimeter by centimeter.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So we have him to thank for what we now have as a much better method. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So now let's actually kind of talk about Pompeii. So, Mount Vesuvius herself was worshipped as the power of Jupiter.
Oh, the power of an entire god.
Yeah.
Wait. You said something, too, that Vesuvius actually meant something sort of, catastrophic. I don't remember what it was.
Oh, yeah. I was going to introduce her here in a second as unquenchable violence.
Unquenchable violence. Home of Jupiter.
Yeah, he's the god of thunder, so that makes sense. The magma pits yeah. It's also said to be where the giants and the sons of the earth were either imprisoned or were honed. I'm not entirely sure. I did not go down the rabbit hole of mythology, since we are history.
We are doing history.
Yeah. So, Pompeii, Mount Vesuvius erupted on August 24th, and she started blowing her top, which is kind of, you're just like whispers of smoke, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone was living their daily lives. Bread was being made. People were going to market. Pompeii was a playground for the wealthy, too. It was, I guess you can compare it to Ellis Island in New York as well. Okay, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
Well, okay.
But,
So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, smoke starts
just kind of seeping out.
kind of spewing.
Yeah.
And at first nobody pays any attention. And it's not just Pompeii here, right? There's other towns that can see this.
Yeah, there's Herculaneum, there's the villas of Atlantis, there's Stabi, which are places that I will be talking about that I found of great interest to me. And then, of course, there were dozens of little villas and estates and homes and towns throughout the bay.
and farms.
So, I couldn't... I'm sure I could have found the name. My ditzy self and a crunch time forgot to write down the name of the bay. But Pompeii was, like I said, Ellis Island.
And that's where everybody who was immigrating into Rome came through.
Yep. So, and that's where I started saying I was getting a little bit ahead of myself. Now, the emperor, during Vesuvius's eruption of 79, was originally General Titus of the Roman Empire, of the Roman army under Emperor Nero.
And I remember we talked about this a little bit. So to understand what happened, how people in that time understood Vesuvius erupting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I singed it.
Okay. Do you mind if I cover this just real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of things that are kind of important in the setup. One of those things is that General Titus had absolutely sacked Jerusalem.
Burned the temple.
Just burned it, and that would have been 10 years before, do you remember? I don't remember now, but it hadn't been long.
Give me 5 seconds, stall.
Yeah, okay. So even before this, a giant earthquake had actually also rocked the region.
6280.
17 years before Vesuvius erupts. Giant earthquake goes through, rocks the region, and the earthquake did a lot of damage. Construction, even Roman construction,
9 years before Vesuvius erupts.
Right. So even Roman construction, that takes a minute. And so Stabi, in particular, was actually still rebuilding all of the earthquake. All of them were.
There's
so you have artisans and craftsmen in the street, and these towns are not only wealthy playgrounds for the powerful, the well-known, the elite, but they're also still under construction. There's a lot of people in these towns.
Yep.
And then 9 years before, General Titus of Rome sacks Jerusalem and burns the temple.
Yep.
And that takes a bunch of slaves from Jerusalem, because that's what happened when you got conquered by Rome. They just carted you back to Rome as slaves. They take a bunch of slaves, and there's a lot of resentment against the Romans by the slaves, who keep saying, well, okay, but you burned our temple. God is coming for you. And they're like, there's plenty of evidence that the Jewish and even, there's a possibility of early Christians, like, telling them, God is coming for you. So, like, that's the setup. That is all happening before Vesuvius even starts really rumbling at all. Anyway.
So, to go back to that little Christian comment you made, in 1938, there was an imprint of a cross that was found that was originally inlaid in plaster and had been pulled out of the wall, like it'd been pried out from the plaster altar. There's like a small table.
Wait, was this one in which village did they find that cross?
I believe this was Herculaneum.
Herculaneum.
And this we didn't use crosses. Like, Christianity in general was said not to use crosses for another 300 years after that.
They thought that at this point in history they were still using an X.
That X is actually the Hebrew letter for tau.
That's interesting. I wonder.
So,
anyway,
yes.
Never mind. That's a whole other question.
Yep. But tau, this is what I gathered. I'm not Hebrew. I am.
It's okay. We can leave the linguistic speculation for another adventure.
Anyways.
Different rabbit hole.
The ultimate meaning of what I gathered from the word, from what the X or the cross, they also said a T was acceptable. A T, come on, obviously. Meaning the end, perfection, righteousness.
Oh, so it's wholeness, it's completion.
Yes. It is also the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
The end.
The end.
Fin.
Yes. And this symbol was found dating 300 years before what modern archaeologists give Christianity credit for the cross.
Well, up till a point, because, we found this stuff on YouTube, so seriously, they must be acknowledging it now. Maybe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, never mind. We won't speculate about that either.
So, the sacking of Jerusalem was in 70 AD, like we said, 9 years before the volcanic eruption. That was 49 years after the said crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
Crucifixion.
Did I say that right?
Nope.
What did I say?
Crucifixion. You said crucifixion. That is a beautiful.
Oh boy, hi. Oh, I had epiphanated that one up. I used that one wrong.
Jordan and I have this thing where she just makes up words, and I'm creating a special dictionary just for her. We have epiphanated, which I love. I think that is the best word ever. And that is the act of having an epiphany. And smiteful, as in God was being smiteful that day.
God was very smiteful in this episode.
Yeah, God was super smiting. This is super smiteful God.
Okay. So, let's actually get a little bit serious here. So, Pompeii itself was buried in 18 hours.
That's not even a whole day.
Yeah, that's not even a whole day. It started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and 18 hours later, we have what we now see as the bodies.
Wow.
Yeah. So, on a plus side, I can't really say on a plus side. I believed growing up that they suffocated on the ash. I believed that they were, like, encased in stone and suffocated. Come to find out, they died in less than 3 seconds. They were basically boiled alive.
Most of them.
Yeah, most of them were basically boiled alive. One of the superheated pyroclasmic flows came through the city and just pretty much killed everything. The ash and everything is part of the pyroclasmic flow, that everything was just kind of settling down on them.
But they were already dead, by and
long
large.
dead by the time they were encased in stone. The cool thing about chemistry, which again, that's a lot of scientific mumbo jumbo that I don't understand how the limestone and the volcanic ash actually reacted. But when the pyroclastic flow hit the ocean, it caused a tsunami and a bunch of water. The whole coast changed when this eruption happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Volcanoes, like, totally changed the landscape.
Some of these villas that I will be talking about later here in a little bit, are once coastline villas. Like, they were on the coast for shipping purposes. And are now super far inland.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, like, this volcano's eruption did quite a bit. This is, like you said, it's comparable to a Krakatoa or even the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Interesting.
And upon one of the recent discoveries, there was Christian graffiti on one of the walls in what they assumed to either be a brothel or perhaps a slave quarter. I don't entirely remember. There was a lot of Christian slaves who were used in brothels. But this room had Sodom and Gomorrah graffitied on it.
I wonder whether that was, whether the graffiti was there because it was a brothel, or whether it was a reference to the volcano.
Well, I mean, like, okay, if you think about it.
Because, like, so one of the big charges in Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just that God destroyed the city. Specifically, it destroyed those cities
Because they were sinful.
because they were extremely sinful, and promiscuity was definitely one of those sins.
Okay,
so, like,
so
it kind of makes sense.
Think about it like this. You are a early Christian Jew who just experienced the Roman army come through and sack your temple and then take you as a slave back to a country that ain't yours.
Right.
A language that you don't know. It's the end of the world at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Already. So, and then when you get to Rome, who's a bunch of pagans, there are phalluses all over the place. You're forced to work at a brothel. Who knows how else you're used if you're not put to brothel work.
Right.
Like, so I mean, like, early Christians, I can see actually having a problem and thinking, holy cow, we are in Sodom and Gomorrah. This is a place of sin.
This is a den of iniquity.
Yeah, they're like, this is where the rich and wealthy come to play, so there is...
So there was probably a lot of iniquity?
Yeah.
Which I prefer by the more, I think, colorful phrase, debauchery.
Debauchery, yes. So the ruins of Pompeii was found, I believe, by King Charles III of Spain, in 1549. Some looting trip, I think.
No, these treasure hunts to the finding the treasures of the Holy Land was, that's been a thing forever.
Right.
And I guess Italy isn't, Rome isn't exactly the Holy Land, but a lot of the history's there. So
Right. And now let's see. I have my notes scattered throughout my notebook. So I'm trying to figure out where I left off. Let's see. We were just talking about.
Oh, tell me about the bread.
The bread. Oh yeah. So this is in
Herculaneum.
Thank you. I just had to stop. Man, I really wish I knew how to talk better. But anyways, they had a fate really worse than Pompeii. But the bread was really cool. Since everything was super flash-eated, it was carbonized, and it still had the imprint and the stamp of who was going to eat its name on it.
Oh, so wait, somebody's name was on the bread.
Yep. Yeah, their name was pressed onto the bread.
And then the bread was basically
fossilized,
flash dried so hard the name stayed?
Yeah. Yeah. And this loaf of bread is 2,000 years old. Well, okay, not quite 2,000 years old.
It's toast now. It ceased to be bread in 79 AD. It's clearly toast.
I mean, I guess Volcano did toast everything. But yeah. And the really cool thing about Herculaneum as well is that we still have a lot of wood products. Furniture. We found wicker that was carbonized from the flash heating.
Oh, wow.
Reed instruments
that just stay
carbonized.
It's amazing that we could find. And then, and this is like, okay, so that was 79 AD. This is almost 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah. And so we're familiar with the bodies of Pompeii who are encased in stone.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, Herculaneum, for the most part, was actually barren of bodies. Nobody found what they found in Pompeii. And that was really weird. It wasn't actually until 20 years ago where we actually found a mass gathering of remains.
So, unlike in Pompeii, where people kind of died where they stood,
yeah,
in Herculaneum, people attempted to get away and gathered in one place. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So Herculaneum was in the process of fleeing. Apparently, they weren't going to stay and stick around for Volcano Day. So
yeah, I wouldn't.
So they had gone down to their pier, or their port, and there's this stone archway that I believe they said 300 out of 4,000 possible civilians have been found. They say Herculaneum was about a 4,000 population town. There was a
and they found 300 people.
About 300 remains, and all of the bodies share a couple really unique features, demonstrating the immense heat from the pyroclastic, the pyroclastic flow. So Pompeii gets hit with all the black stuff.
Right,
Pompeii gets hit with the heavy ash. They get hit with the white ash. They get hit with a lot of the gas flow. So what I gathered is it kind of like when she went up and started her mushroom cloud and hit that cold temperature of the stratosphere, she split somehow, and the wind carried all of her black ash and rock one way, covering Pompeii, and then her gas came through and superheated
Herculaneum.
Yeah. And the superheated pyroclastic flow hit also in Pompeii, but it did. Herculaneum didn't get the
heavy ash fall afterwards.
Yeah, the way.
Interesting.
Yeah, Herculaneum was actually buried under 80 foot of ash. 80 meters. Sorry, 4-story building.
Wow.
Yeah, so they did end up with a lot of ash throughout flow.
So didn't you say, like, and I've known about Pompeii forever, until you started doing research on this episode, I'd never heard of Herculaneum. And that's partly because people didn't even know it existed for a while, right?
Yeah, it was lost until 1930s, and Special treat. It is actually said to be part of the lost Atlantis myth. Now, and that's a special treat. I said in the Odyssey we were going to connect Homer's Iliad to the Atlantis myth. Well, here we are bringing Volcano Day and Atlantis together.
I mean, okay, so just to be clear where the history of the myth collide. First of all, if you follow the Atlantis myth, that should have been more than 5,000 years before
the Dryas.
Right. And therefore, like at least 15,000 years before Mount Vesuvius erupts.
Yes.
So the only reason that Herculaneum is believed to be a part of the Atlantis myth is because it was lost for so long that people legitimately just thought it was legend and are like, oh, yep, it must be part of Atlantis.
Just like Troy, which is kind of why I wanted to do the Odyssey.
Right, and then like Herculaneum, Troy is also a real place. It's not just myth and legend.
Yep. And really cool thing, Herculaneum was known for its art. So like Pompeii was Ellis Island. You can kind of think of Herculaneum as like fashion and art.
Oh, it's Paris.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Paris. One of the beautiful things is all of the marble statues that they're finding, or I guess I can't say all of them, but quite a few of the marble statues have the paint still on them.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
because the only reason those white statues are white is because just,
the
erosion just took the paint away.
The frescoes are beautifully preserved. Herculaneum was forgotten until the 1930s. Well, at that point, Giuseppe was already doing his archaeology.
The better, more correct way.
So, luckily, Herculaneum wasn't looted as bad and is beautifully preserved. Pompeii, on the other hand, has lost all of its funding. She's no longer preserved. She's actually falling apart.
Right.
The runes becoming runes. Yeah.
So, and I do want to mention this just as an aside because it's something you mentioned to me. So I was like, well, then why did they stop digging at Pompeii? And it turns out they didn't just lack funding because people sort of magically lost interest. An earthquake hit the area and deeply in 1980 and deeply destabilized it. Also, enough of it had been dug up and exposed that it was starting to really, really wear down. So it's a legitimate safety issue, and just no tourists, no more archaeological digging. It's kind of just a matter of preserve what they can.
Yep, everything's been documented. Photographs have been taken of what can be, and at this point, it's just kind of like preserve this national historic site. All of these locations I talk about are on the UNICEF. Is it UNICEF? National Historic.
I don't know. I don't know where you were this whole week. We've been off on our adventures.
Right. I can't remember what the not the national, but the Global Historic Foundation of Preserving Historic Sites, National Heritage.
Oh, the World History Foundation.
Yeah, World Heritage Foundation.
Is it World Heritage?
I think it's the World Heritage Foundation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah. So, we were talking about what the bodies showed us from the thermal heat. So the bodies were contorted in Herculaneum. And some of because they weren't buried in the way of Pompeii was, where people are encased over each other and living their daily lives. They got a weird blast of a tsunami and the pyroclastic. I don't know how science works. Mother Nature is crazy. And so they got the heat where their bodies contorted, their brains boiled, and even skulls exploded.
Yeah. Oh my god!
Yeah, they've been doing some forensics over the last 20 years, and, like, they've been like, no, these are crazy fractures.
Is this also why maybe we're not finding some of the bodies? I mean, I'm just wondering, like, did some of the bodies just literally get blown apart? Yeah.
Evaporate completely?
Or at least enough that they wouldn't have been preserved in anything as anything we'd recognize now.
Oh yeah, absolutely, in my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, the way this volcano went off, she went off like a bomb. She destroyed everything. So, now, Stabby. Stabby is an interesting little port town. She was the wealthiest playground. She was kind of like Sin City.
Oh, Vegas.
Yeah, she was Vegas. She's been around since the Punic Wars. She got destroyed by Carthage, and then eventually sacked by Rome and conquered.
Okay, so she's going back and forth during the... Okay.
She's been back and forth a little bit.
Totally covering the coolness that is Carthage at some point. Okay, but go ahead.
I think we might have to do a double episode.
We're gonna,
I think,
There's so much.
So, and then in 62, they were working on rebuilding after the earthquake, and then we get, boom, Volcano Day on 79 AD. So, Stabby's had a lot of, like, rebuilding, but it's always been just, like, this wealthy party town. Pliny the Elder actually is said to have lost his life rescuing survivors here.
Oh, in Stabby?
Yeah, in Stabby. He had made trips from, I believe his villa was in Pompeii, and he was sailing to Stabby to rescue... depends on what story you look at.
Right, we've been...
done a couple different stories.
To be fair, like, every documentary that we watched about this, or that brought it up, gave a slightly different accounting of how Pliny the Elder died. And the only thing that they all had in common was, we don't know exactly how he died.
He went on a boat.
Yeah. But apparently he went to go rescue some people, he rescued some people, and then he may have gone to have dinner with some friends, and then no more Pliny the Elder.
Yep. And
we know this because his nephew Pliny the Younger told us so.
Yes. Pliny the Younger's work is actually, I won't say like world famous, but it is because it is the only record that we have for the destruction of Pompeii, Herculaneum. And now...
Well, and Stabby.
Yeah, and Stabby, and pretty much that whole area.
Right.
So... Oh, boy.
What else did you want to say about Stabby, or did you want to move on to Atlantis?
I am checking out my notes real quick. Because I feel like there was something I wanted to talk about in Stabby.
Well, you were saying it was particularly the playground of the Playboys. So to speak.
Yeah, I actually think I summed up. Let's see. We talked about the crossing Christianity and that plaster. We talked about,
before we get to Atlantis, let's go back to that, because we did talk about the beginning of that and the sacking of Rome. But bring that around, because...
Oh, yeah, I did kind of drop that story off.
Yeah, well, because we were at the beginning, and now we're getting closer to the end. So.
Right, okay. So, the last thing we said was, like, the shock and the horror of all the phalluses and the brothels.
Right, so the Jews and the very early Christians that were taken slaves by the Romans.
Some of these Christians may have even been alive to see the crucifixion of Jesus.
Of Jesus, yeah. This is what did you say? It's not even that long.
50 years?
50 years. So they're literally spreading this message. They've been spreading this message since the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed.
Well, think about
They're
it.
like, God is coming for you. That's where we left off. God is coming for you, they said, and then holy crap, because God showed up.
God showed up, for sure. So yeah, you're not wrong on that one. It probably was perceived. So a lot of the early Christians, a lot of the slaves and people, and even free people who weren't taken as slaves at that point were under the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So they were traveling to Rome. Who's the most famous apostle that brought Christianity to Rome? Was it Peter?
Paul?
Paul, yeah. This is predating Paul.
Right.
In 60 AD, it is said that there is preaching in the bay of at the port of Pompeii.
Okay.
Hang on, I have to find that note specifically. Yeah, there's preaching in the harbor. That's 19 years before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So there's already Christianity well into, which would make sense.
Right.
Because of the sacking of Jerusalem. And in order to get to Rome, you have to travel by land through Pompeii. So geographically speaking, you can't sail up to Naples and get in. Naples is too rocky. The coastline is just a little too dangerous for your ship to get in. So you go into the port of Pompeii, which is why it's kind of like Ellis Island.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be...
And then that's how you get on the road to Rome.
Exactly.
Well, other than the fact that all roads lead to Rome.
Well, as in Rome, do as the Romans do. So people traveled. There was I think Paul said that he met brothers when he landed in Pompeii.
Yes, yeah.
So what would brothers mean?
Well, that would certainly
mean there are the Christians and Jews already there.
Mm-hmm.
And in 64 AD, Emperor Nero blamed Christians for the burning of Rome. So there were definitely already a good foundation.
That's a lot of resentment.
That's a lot of resentment.
That's a whole lot of wishing that God would get all smiteful on thy neighbor.
Well, on top of that, the pagan Emperor Nero was beheading the Christians, feeding them to the lions, and even crucifying them.
Yeah.
All for fun and entertainment.
Yeah, wrapping them. One of the things I read was that they used to legitimately wrap slaves in animal skins, and then feed them to stuff.
Lions, dogs would rip them apart. Yeah.
So it was a persecuted cult, and then when Vesuvius actually explodes, this does something. Not only do Jews and Christians wind up feeling incredibly vindicated,
yes.
They can literally look at everyone around them and go, ha,
well,
God smited thee.
They definitely said that. They absolutely did.
And weird.
So much so they may have written a book about it.
Right. All the, definitely. This is well, not just you, but this is fun stuff.
Yeah. But before I mention my little speculation, the early Christians in Rome were converting Roman pagans. They were warning
That's where it was going.
The Romans, and they were converting them.
Because Vesuvius put the fear of God into everybody. So
we had a mass population of Christianity who was warning the Romans, change your ways or our God will smite you. And sure enough, they believe when Mount Vesuvius erupted, it was the wrath of God coming down on them.
So, which got a lot more conversions, like
a lot more conversions.
And then that emperor, he didn't last very long after that either, did he?
No, he died 2 years later.
So by then, General Titus is Emperor Titus.
Yep.
And he dies just 2 years after Vesuvius, so nobody's even recovered from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They must have felt very vindicated.
Oh, I bet they did. I honestly believe they were so vindicated that they wrote a book about 100 years later, about it.
What? Yeah, go ahead.
I think they wrote the book of Revelations describing the destruction of Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Huh.
So, Pompeii and Herculaneum was destroyed in 79 AD. So, I did a little digging, and it is believed that the Book of Revelations was written anywhere from 90 to 120 AD.
Right.
So, and I wouldn't bring this up if this was just my own, like, talking out of the side of my neck. This was something that actually came up a couple times, especially because of the graffiti from Sodom and Gomorrah and other graffiti that was done by converts. And
go
everything.
ahead. Right.
So, because of the vindication, the pagan beliefs, I do believe that the Book of Revelation might actually be describing a Sodom and Gomorrah of Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Interesting. I've heard a theory, and I don't want to harp on this point too much.
Yeah.
I've heard a theory that about the time that the Book of Revelations was written,
Yeah.
a very popular type of thing to write was sort of this revenge fantasy. Anyway, it was a whole lot of God shall curse my enemies, and all these terrible, terrible things will happen, and I will be vindicated. And like, as a type of pulp fiction,
Right.
this was an extremely common thing for writers to write about, which I found just really fascinating, because Revelations was also written right then in this sort of fantasy, I don't want to use that keyword, but, revenge writing.
Yeah.
Pulp fiction. The other. Yes, revenge pulp fiction, that's how we're going to say that. I
heard something similar to that,
I found it fascinating.
And I do agree with you. I found that very fascinating.
And then he's got this great description to go on, because...
Yeah, real-life events happened.
And
it rained fire from the sky.
And then nobody ever actually returned to Pompeii, right?
Rome returned once and sacked it. But that wasn't for, like, hundreds of years.
That was just to, like, sack it and leave again.
Yeah. And Pompeii wasn't discovered until, like, the mid-1500s. And it was accidentally discovered fixing aquifers, or aqueducts.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. And pretty much forgotten about again for a long time. And same with all the other archaeological sites.
Right, because in the 1500s, when they found old stuff like that, they were like, oh, it's in the way of the king's project.
Right. Yeah, so let's just bulldoze right through it. So, before we do actually wrap this up, I did want to talk about the villas of Atlantis.
Oh, right.
This is another World Heritage Site. Actually, all of them. I think I already said that. All of them are World Heritage Sites. So there's 3 villas that I'm going to kind of talk about here. We have Villa A, Villa B. So original, right?
Right. This is when I was studying Göbekli and Karahan Tepe's.
Yeah.
This week, I guess this is how archaeologists refer to sites, because I'm constantly hearing enclosure A, enclosure B, chamber A, chamber B. It goes on like that. Yeah.
I mean, okay, that makes sense. That does. I'm not gonna, like, knock it. I am, though. So, now, Villa A was the first one to be discovered. And it was a luxury residential villa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So like a big manor house.
It was definitely a big manor house. It had its own bath. And in the bath, they discovered a terracotta pot. And on the bottom of that pot had the stamp of the final owner's name on the bottom of it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
wow.
so we actually know who the final owner of that villa was. His name was Lucius Nonius Flores. Sorry, my Italian is horrible. I don't speak Italian. Forgive me.
Lucius Nonius Flores.
Yeah, that's what I said. And that was actually discovered in 1593 as well during an aqueduct construction project. So I would assume Villa A and Pompeii aren't too far away from each other, or if they are far enough. I didn't actually look on the map. I had maybe a map, but brain, not compute. Anyways, and when Villa A was actually discovered, they had to, again, stop excavation. There was a lot of having to stop excavation on these sites. A lot. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just because of, like, instability. But it was actually because toxic gas bubbles. They would open places and they'd be filled with the toxic gas still.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I do remember you talking about that too.
Yeah.
Which the earthquake also did not help.
Yeah, the earthquake released a lot of those toxic gas bubbles, made it easier for the gas to escape as well. So the whole environment's still just a little not safe, apparently, almost 2,000 years later. And now Villa B I found a little more interesting, and again, the villas of Atlantis was kind of hard to find. I thought it was really cool that Meta AI told me, not Meta, I'm sorry, I used Gemini. Gemini told me about Atlantis, and then all of my research only gave me like 5 sentences. But Villa B was discovered in 1974, making it actually one of the most recent discoveries for the whole devastation of Pompeii. I'm sorry.
Vesuvius.
Yes, Vesuvius. And it's actually considerably older than Villa A.
Oh.
Yeah, so they actually think Villa B was constructed sometime around the 2nd BC.
Oh, so it's like
It's old.
200 years older, more or less, than the destruction.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
No, it's about 100 years older. Because, okay, so 2 BC is
200 years before 79.
Just 2 years. 1, 2, and then you have 79.
You said 2 BC.
Yeah, so it's like
So 80 years.
80, yeah, less than 100 years difference.
Oh, okay, okay.
But, yeah, it's about 100 years old. And it was a production mill. It was, I guess, what we would call an industrial farm today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, its main product was the obvious in ancient Rome. They were wine and oil.
Yep, okay.
Specifically olive
Grapes
oil.
and olives, grapes and olives.
Right.
Nobody's shocked.
Yeah. I found what was really cool here. They found 70 rooms. There's a couple different things. One said 70, some said more, some said less. There's 70 rooms roughly, and the villa is 2 stories tall.
Wow.
And it had
So it must have been very grand in its time.
I could only imagine. The pictures that I found on the videos, it was pretty, even with like how they have it now. I don't want to say the villas are like open for tourists or anything, but they're very immaculate.
Wow.
And I think it is because, like, these are main World Heritage sites.
Sure.
Where, like, I think they are open for tourism because there was a lot of...
Pompeii.
There was, yeah, not Pompeii, but the villas are open for Atlantis.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was a lot of drone videos I found, like, people flying through them, the grass is all kept nice. So, like, I do think, like, you can see some of these villas. And it had one of the most sophisticated drainage systems of its time, too. For, like, being 100 years older than, like, the rest of the surrounding area that's been discovered. And this is actually, out of all the villas in Atlantis, this is the only one that was found with bodies in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in Stabby, where everybody tried to gather.
Quite possibly. The bodies were found clustered and grouped together, assuming that they were probably comforting each other, being like, hey, this is our last moment. We're praying to our gods that we survive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's kind of where, like, how a lot of the bodies have been found throughout. Like, every time bodies are found, it's not just really one body. There is probably a part of another one.
So they pretty much had just enough time to, like, start reacting, but not actually get away.
Pretty much had enough time to be like, and then you're dead. Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah, they're I mean, like,
But then, like, also, this is the moment that Christianity really cements itself in the world.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, because just within the next 100 years, you have Constantine.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh, that's right. Yeah, that's not that long afterwards. And there, I mean, that's a story I'll bet a lot of you know, but that... You know, the story of Constantine is endlessly fascinating.
Right. So, yeah, and like I said, within 100 years, so at that point, yeah, we already had Christianity as a infant religion that was slowly gaining a good foundation. Excuse me. But then the volcano pretty much proved the wrath of their god.
No. Or at least that feels like that's how it was definitely interpreted at the time.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a cool story. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun looking this up. I had a lot of fun just in general. I feel like there was something I wanted to add before we go.
Well, did you want to talk about 1944?
That was the opening, right? I said...
Well, I don't know how far you got.
No, I didn't really want to talk too much about that, because that wasn't the volcano that we were talking about.
No.
Well, that wasn't.
Although it did destroy an Allied airfield.
Yeah, an entire...
In the middle of World War II, just kind of... Yeah. That was, unfortunate for us.
It did say something here on the AI, about it being, it was an absolute disaster because there was a Nazi bombing raid that had just happened right before. It caused $25 million worth of damages to the aircraft and displaced 12,000 people.
Oh, wow. And in 1944,
yeah.
That's a lot of people and a lot of property damage.
In comparison to the 600,000 that lost their lives in 79, only 26 civilians lost their lives to the 44 eruption.
That's not the same level.
Yeah, right.
Well, so is anything else? Yeah.
I think that is. Oh yeah, I think that's it. That's a wrap.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and joining us. Join us next week. I'm going to be covering Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
I can't wait.
And I'm not going to say the name right now because I'm going to get it wrong, but basically the beaded field or the field of beads. We're going to talk about a tribe that's even older than that.
Nice.
Yeah, going to dive deep into prehistory and talk about all the things that I discovered about Hunter-Gatherer Man, because there's just an amazing story. Can't wait to have you guys join us on it. Thanks so much for being here.
Bye.
Live long and prosper.